Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lincoln Journal-Star's Life in the Red podcast. Luke Mullin and Amie Just here once again another week. Today, kind of the burning topic we want to talk about is we got to recap a football season, officially over, 5-7. Pretty tough end of the year. We'll get into that. Got some basketball updates as well. And wanted to mention for all the volleyball fans of the podcast, we will have a volleyball-only episode dropping later this week, myself and Amie, and of course, our Brent Wagner previewing NCAA tournament, talking about the Huskers' chances. Excited for that one. There's a lot of excitement about this NCAA tournament run.
Yeah, Nebraska's the number one overall seed. And, if they keep winning, they would have a home court advantage. I almost said home field. Home court advantage all the way through the Elite Eight. So it's a good position to be in.
Yep. We'll have a lot to break down. Of course, the bracket, Huskers' chances, how the team's looking right now, everything, again, with Brent later this week. But talking about a couple other sports before we get into football, I want to talk with a brief update about the soccer team real quick. Had mentioned last week that they were in the Elite Eight. Their season did come to an end, 2-1 overtime loss to Stanford. Sarah Weber had tied the match with 4 minutes remaining to even send it into overtime. So really nice moment for the team there, that late equalizer. And officially Nebraska's best NCAA tournament run since the 1999 season. Really great year for the whole team.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The record book, I feel bad for whoever needs to update that because it's going to take some time between all of the records that Eleanor Dale broke this year.
Yeah, a lot of categories need updating, huh?
Yeah, points responsible for, goals, shots on goal, shots. I mean, she was up there in just about all of them.
Yeah, so absolutely well done to the entire soccer coaching staff, as well as a good group that came in here and made it an Elite Eight tournament run this year. But moving on to basketball, women's and men's teams, they were both in action this last week, some games around the Thanksgiving break. The women's team, 2 games down in Florida, beat Lamar 75-61. Natalie Potts and Jazz Shelley, really good scoring performances in that one. Followed by 88-81 defeat to TCU. Got down early in that one. TCU 7-0. They're undefeated after that win, but kind of that big hole, they started to score a lot there in the second half, but just too much of a deficit to come back from, right?
Yeah, no, you can't get down like that to a team that can score at the clip that they do. Valiant comeback effort there, but just a little too late on that one, I think.
Yeah, and obviously, it's November, we're a long way out, but some of these non-conference wins, you got to pick them up come tournament selection time. You might be looking back on, that would have been a nice one just to boost the resume a little bit, but lots of games left. Just a case of the early deficit being too much. Alexis Markowski, double-double in that one. Another good game from Jazz Shelley. And of note, Natalie Potts, 22 points on 9 of 10 shooting against Lamar. Got a Big Ten Freshman of the Week on her, second time in 3 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, the way that she has played this season has definitely been something that's impressed. Hopefully she can keep it up.
Yeah, really raised the level of that front court, coming in shooting at a very high level.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, super efficient down there. And for this week, Nebraska hosting Florida Atlantic on Wednesday night, Georgia Tech Saturday afternoon on that one, the women's basketball update. And as for the men's basketball team, 7-0 start, best since 1992-93 season. And I think these most 2 games were kind of interesting because the defense faded a little bit, but the shooting really got going these last 2.
Yeah, they were not pleased with their defensive effort, especially after this last one.
Hoiberg made that clear, didn't he?
So did Rink Mast. Rink Mast did not shy away from it either. But you'd rather learn those lessons in a win than a loss. And yeah, they've got a lot to work on this week. Thankfully for them, only 1 game this week, so more time can be spent on figuring out why their defense, for a defense-oriented team, has faded the past couple weeks.
Yeah, and those 2 results was 89-79 win over Duquesne and 85-72 win over Cal State Fullerton. That win over Fullerton, Rink Mast, Bryce Williams, Jamarcus Lawrence, Casey Tominaga, and Jawan Gary all scoring in double figures. So scoring coming from a lot of different places, good 3-point shooting effort in that one as well. And when you look at this season, I mean, this is right where Nebraska wanted to be, 7-0. They got the whole week off. Number 15 Creighton's coming to town. Like, there is some serious buzz about the start to the season that they're having.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, I'm more impressed with how they've continued to gel just because of all of the preseason and early season injuries, and yet they're still here at 7-0. I'm really just intrigued and impressed by the job that Rink Mast has been able to do on that end of the floor and, continue to shoot outside. That's a threat that they didn't have last year. And then Casey is back to Casey form. He was perfect this weekend. Didn't miss a single shot, I don't think, which is crazy.
Pretty good. Yep.
Yeah, I don't think you can ask for better. And then Juwan Gary, while his scoring output this weekend was a little less than it had been earlier, his physicality just really changes things when he missed all those games due to his suspension. So having them at almost full strength, there's a couple guys who are still out, will be good for them come Sunday for what should be an interesting one.
Yep. Certainly will be tested, that defense. And I don't know, maybe it's just, 7 games in, it's obviously a much smaller sample size, but it just feels to me like one of the most cohesive teams that Hoiberg has had. Like, the way that they run offense, I mean, there's been a lot of times in past seasons where it was just, ISO, take your turn. I mean, they move the ball. They're playing really, really good team basketball together.
Yeah, and they're spreading things around a lot more than they did last year. Obviously, it's early. It's still November, but it's a good start for them.
Yeah, certainly. And of course, that big test ranked opponent, Creighton, coming to PBA. That is 3:00 on Sunday. Expecting loud, sold out crowd. Going to be quite the buzz in the arena that day.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, they're gonna be getting all the pregame Husker Vision boards. They're getting all that stuff ready. They're gonna be able to pump up the crowd, I think, certainly in that one. So two big games there for women's basketball and men's basketball, again at home this weekend. But wanting to, of course, talk about the football team, recap this 2023 season. First off, I mean, 13-10 loss to Iowa. That was a pretty brutal one, adding to a string of one-score losses that are going to sting heavily.
Yeah, it was the third game of the season that ended with a game-winning field goal for the other team, with the game ending in a 13-10 score.
Obscure stat that is horrible.
Yeah, I mean, it bookended the season because they started that way against Minnesota, and then Maryland, and then at the end of Iowa. Yeah, 13-10, I think, will be a triggering number sequence for Nebraska fans for a while.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty fitting that it just, the roller coaster that last minute of the game where, Iowa's driving, they turn it over, and suddenly, it's the hope that gets you. That's what the fans will be saying, Nebraska gets the ball, and then the Chubba Purdy interception, turn it right back, the field goal. I mean, that's just about sums it up, huh?
A field goal from a kicker who wasn't even on their depth chart.
Yep, the backup kicker coming in. Yeah, quite the string of events. And of course, I mean, this means that Nebraska ends the year 5-7, missing a bowl. Last week, we kind of talked about a little bit if this means their season is a failure or not. Not sure how we feel about that a week after, going through that game. But looking back at this 2023 season, what's your overall take on just how well this Nebraska team performed?
Yeah, even after that Iowa loss, I still wouldn't consider it a failure. But there are a lot of things, like specific things that feel like it. The turnovers, for one. They cut out 15% of those turnovers, they're going to a bowl game. If they cut out half of them, completely different conversation. They only have 10% of those turnovers, their ceiling's 10-2. Like, I don't want to make excuses for that, and I'm not going to. But just taking those off of the table, this is a completely different team. And I think that's part of why Nebraska fans are so frustrated with all of this. It's just because they talked about it week 1, then week 2, then week 3. It was a season-long issue that never got fixed, and at some points looked like it just kept getting worse. Like, I would be very, very frustrated if I was a Nebraska fan because they said they were working on it all year and it never got better.
Yeah, in every loss, just couldn't get out of their way at times. And to your point with the turnovers, it was like even those wins, a lot of those wins were in spite of the turnovers too.
Yes.
Like they were an issue even in the games that they won.
Yeah. Yeah, they shot themselves in the foot so many times. I'm surprised they still have a foot. I
That's a
mean,
good one. Yeah.
just like how? How does this keep happening? And it's something they're going to have to take a really long look in the mirror at in the off season because this cannot continue to happen. It just can't.
Yeah, certainly. And I do think too, a relatively easier schedule, a weak division that they were in, obviously getting out to that 5-win mark and then losing the final 4, like all of those different factors, I think impact just how emotional and disappointing that end of the season was. But like I said last week, like if you'd looked at it a year ago, 5 wins would have been palatable, certainly. The nature in which the season ended is really tough, but I think a lot of people can see Matt Rule is a long-term coach. He's got a long-term philosophy, and I don't think he's going to be panicking over a 5-win season in year 1.
No, but he should be panicking over those
That's
turnovers.
right, because that could be the consistent thing that limits seasons to come, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's a
absolutely.
trend that's been over several seasons.
Yeah, it predates him for sure, but this was bad.
Yep, certainly. And breaking down, getting a little bit more in depth here into the offense and the defense. We'll have some awards coming up here at the end, but want to go position by position, share our thoughts on how these different position groups performed, the top performers as well, top players. And of course, got to start on offense with the quarterback spot. Jeff Sims, the guy, they got him out of the portal. He comes in those first 2 weeks. I mean, they were not anywhere near the level of quarterback play you need to win games.
No, absolutely not. And, he got that high ankle sprain against Colorado and then, was effectively benched after he got healthy, came in relief in a couple games against Purdue and against Maryland and just didn't, or continued to have the issues that he was having in the first 2 weeks. And you can't do that.
Yeah. What I wonder is too, like, if he didn't get injured that early, like how long was the coaching staff going to be able to stick with him and hope they could fix those mistakes? Would he have fixed those mistakes? Ultimately, what we saw these last couple of weeks indicated it's just part of his game in this offensive system with everything around him. I mean, it was just not a good combination of factors for him this year.
I was calling for his benching during Colorado. So.
Yeah.
But
it was tough. I mean, it was a really tough start. And once that ball gets rolling, it was really hard for him to turn that around, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the end, I mean, having 3 different quarterbacks start multiple games, I don't think that would have been anywhere near the desire of Matt Rule and Marcus Satterfield. But Heinrich Harburg, he led that winning streak, showed a lot as a runner, but really struggled in the passing game. Several really, really bad interceptions that people noticed. And Chubba Purdy then those final 2 weeks looked really strong at moments, struggled at others, inconsistent. Inconsistent, probably a good word to describe these quarterbacks, except when it came to turning over the ball.
Yeah. The only thing consistent about them was that they continued to turn the ball over.
And they could all run. They're all good runners. We'll give them.
We'll give them that, I guess. Different types of runner, though.
That's true.
But yeah, no, just not what you wanted from any of them.
Yeah, very, very poor year from the most important position on the field. Put a lot of pressure, I think, on the defense and, of course, on the other skill positions who were severely limited by injuries. Running back Ramir Johnson and Gabe Ervin, only a couple of weeks into the year, they both went down, season-ending injuries. Did allow Emmett Johnson to kind of emerge as a key guy in that room.
Yeah, he was a bright spot, I think, he was off the depth chart when the season started, buried behind Ramir and Gabe and Anthony Grant. But he, really embraced, I think, that next man up mentality and showed what he could do. Yeah, he had a few plays I'm sure he would want back, but all in all, a pleasant season for him.
Yeah, looked like a really, really good, capable runner there against those Big Ten defenses. And really, I think Gabe Ervin looked incredible to start the year. Kind of a what if there if he'd been healthy for the whole year. Definitely could have been a 1,000-yard rusher.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think so.
Yeah, so a lot of potential there. Him coming back, Emmett Johnson and Ramir Johnson, all potentially coming back there in the running back room. And then at the wide receiver spot, the veteran core that they expected, Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, Marcus Washington, Billy Kemp, they all got hurt. IGC in Washington, season-ending injuries before the midway point. Billy Kemp missing a couple weeks. And Kemp was very consistent. He was good slot wide out. But the loss of those veteran guys put the freshmen on the field right away. They made some big plays, but still, it was definitely very noticeable that the separation wasn't always there from this wide receiver group.
Yeah, and they showed flashes. Like, there were parts of, Malachi Coleman's game that I really liked. There were parts of, Jalen Lloyd's game that I really liked. But you could tell that they're freshmen. But man, what they could turn into will be really special. And I'm glad that if they had to be thrown into action this season, I'm glad they got that opportunity. Yeah. Even if it does suck that that's how they got in there. I mean, you don't want your number one wide receiver to go down with an ACL tear the first week of the season, or your number two guy to, have the same thing happen to him the next week.
Yeah, certainly the long-term benefit from that will be great. But I also think with the inexperience getting those young players on the field, I mean, there's a lot of times this season where the play call was late, like they had to burn a timeout, guys weren't sure where to line up. Like, obviously, it's no one's fault in particular. Like, this was an offense-wide thing, but certainly, like, working out some of those issues, I think that definitely happened this year. So they'll see if that wide receiver room can make a big jump next season as well. And tight ends and fullbacks, Thomas Fidone, full year from him. Nate Borkacher and Luke Lindenmeyer, kind of those backup tight ends in there, and mostly Janier and Bonner at fullback. Barrett Liebentritt played a little bit. Honestly, thought we'd see a little bit more fullback love in the offense. They were there, but I mean, didn't get a whole lot of touches, which, obviously they got other jobs to do, but thought, maybe Satterfield could incorporate those guys. That's what I thought.
Yeah, they were so high on it early.
Yep.
And then it just didn't evolve into what I think everybody thought it could. But another thing for them to address in the offseason.
Yeah. Really good year for Thomas Fidone as well. Consistent target there in the passing game.
Yeah. I hate how, regardless of who was in there at quarterback, they consistently overthrew him. That's where a lot of those interceptions came from, is overthrowing Thomas Fidone on a crossing route over the middle. But
I think it showed, though, that he was good at creating some separation against those linebackers, though, how often he was open over the middle of the field. Really good season for him there. Again, fully healthy, able to get through that one. And then the offensive line dealt with some injuries, had to get shuffled up there a little bit there mid-season. But I thought really good in the run game. Inconsistent pass blocking. Like, they had some good weeks, had some bad weeks where they were just getting rushed off the edge constantly. But really, I thought a pretty good improvement for this unit from last year.
Yeah, I would say so. And I really liked the depth that they had there. The depth they had there. You didn't know going into the season what that would look like. There were just so many young guys who just hadn't had any opportunity to play that would be called upon if something happened. And Justin Evans Jenkins did a phenomenal job playing several different positions when he needed to.
Yeah, and I thought Ben Scott coming in, veteran center, did a great job. Bryce Benhart has become a veteran right tackle there, had some very good games as well. So offensive line made a jump, I thought, as well. But again, pretty limited season from this offense overall. Definitely the story of this year's Nebraska team was its defense. And that starts up front, the defensive line, Ty Robinson, Nash Huntmaker, the whole crew. I mean, there's 8-10 guys who got in there over the course of this season, made an impact. This whole defensive line unit, I think, had a great season.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest question marks we had coming into the year was, do they have the depth? Will it work? And yes and yes to both of those questions. Really, really impressed by what Tony White got out of those guys, how they were just put in the right positions to succeed.
Yeah, that's a good point, too, because they were definitely experimenting a little bit those first few weeks, like what were the right packages that were going to work, getting guys in different situations. I think we saw these last, 4 or 5 weeks. They kind of tightened up that rotation a little bit. Robinson and Huntmaker out there a lot. Like they knew how legit these two guys were, and they were those two in particular were in the backfield a lot.
Yeah, incredible seasons from both of them.
Yep. Good pass rush, good run defense, solid effort from that D line overall. And of course, linebackers back there supporting them. Two of the main guys coming into the year, Luke Reimer, Nick Henrik. Both of them got dinged up, missed a couple weeks. Other players emerged, Javen Wright, Mekhi Bear. Two of those like depth players to begin the year. You thought, maybe they're going to get some snaps here or there. Those two guys were very key down the stretch. John Bullock also in that room, MJ Sherman at the jack. I mean, there were a lot of linebackers that got in as well, and Luke Reimer in the middle of that played a very big role.
Yes, he did. He is one of the only defenders on this very good defense that earned recognition from the Big Ten today.
Yeah, a little surprising, but
they
are some very
much that it's hard to pick.
And there are some very, very good defenses in this conference too.
Yes.
So, yeah, definitely maybe not the postseason recognition for that unit, but their collective totals were super impressive. And as well, the defensive backs, the secondary, Quentin Newsome, that senior, what you expect from him, very much so a lockdown cornerback, had a great season as well. Tommy Hill, by the way, one of the standout performers for this team, really came on, had a great year at cornerback. Safety position got shaken up a little bit. Deshaun Singleton, Phelan Sanford, Marcus Buford, like it changed a lot week to week there.
Yeah, I really liked when Buford was healthy enough to come back. I liked the job that he did there. Because you never know with guys coming off of those ACLs, but he did a phenomenal job after not having played football for over a year.
Yeah, and the thing that I think too is like this defense was really good. How much better would they have been if Deshaun Singleton played all 12 games? Because he was phenomenal those first few weeks to start the year. Really highlighted in this scheme, I think, his strengths there, playing in the box a little bit, being that impactful secondary guy coming up.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yep. And as well, got to give some love to the special teams unit. Ed Foley coming in. Definitely some improvements were needed from a really, really bad couple of seasons, inconsistency, lack of returns, all sorts of things going on. How do you think that Ed Foley's first season went in that area?
Yeah, I feel like there were some things that were incredible. I mean, 4 blocked kicks. That's one of the top performances of the season by any team. And then you have the woes at punt return. I haven't looked up the stat, but I would imagine Nebraska is at the bottom of the barrel in punt return again. So that needs to get figured out ASAP. But I mean, you have some great things and you have some garbage things, and it's good to have good things to draw from, but definitely there are some things to shore up as well.
Yeah, this is not a statistical statement, but I feel like they created more game-changing plays than they had go against them in the special teams department.
Yeah, I would agree. But I just can't stop thinking about how abysmal their punt return game was.
Yeah. Certainly, they left a lot of yards out there on the field in that category, but
yes,
some improvements. Freshman kicker Tristan Alvano had a decent year. They'll look at punter Brian Buschini had a pretty decent 3.3 yard decrease in his average punt from a year ago, so that'll be an off-season discussion as well. But that's our thoughts on the special teams unit, and want to give some thoughts on the coaching staff in general. Any position group, position coach, coordinator, anybody who you thought, they really coached up their unit this year?
Tony White, man.
Yeah.
He did a bang-up job with that defense. I'll be the first to admit I was a little skeptical because I just kept going back to how last season when Eric Chenander was fired and Bill Bush was, elevated to be their defensive coordinator, and how he said he had to simplify things because the defense was just too complicated for these guys. And I'm like, well, how is an even more complicated defense going to work? Well, worked just fine.
Yeah, I thought it was great too. Like, we were there in August, like, are you still installing like the players? And he was so confident. He was like, no, the guys know their spots in the defense. And I think they certainly proved that in their play. I'll mention Terrence Knight, and certainly for getting that defensive line unit ready. I think just in the glimpses that we see from him at practice, like such an active coach too, like getting in those drills, showing the technique. I mean, he's a former pro. He clearly has a lot of important lessons that he passed down to that group.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he deserves the recognition as well.
Yeah, certainly a great year for his unit. And I think it's award time. We've got 5 different categories. We want to hand out some awards to this year's team. And we'll start off with our Unsung Hero Award. Maybe not the stat production or the recognition, but contributed a lot. I mentioned him earlier. Tommy Hill, to me, is that guy. He played a little wide receiver. Like, that's kind of forgotten about as we got further in the year. Like, he could have played a lot of wide receiver this season, if not for some injuries there in the secondary. I think really came along. He's going to be a great corner for this team next year. Honorable mention to Alex Bullock. Third most offensive snaps there, really consistent wide receiver.
Right. I am going to get some eyebrow raises for my answer, and that's fine. I'm going with long snapper Marco Ortiz. I think that you never heard about him. And on a unit that had its ups and downs, he was so consistent. I don't think he had a bad snap all season, and he is being recognized for that. He is one of the 3 finalists for the Manley Award, which goes to the best long snapper in the country. If he wins that, he could have his jersey retired, because that's how Nebraska does things. If you win a major award, or if you're a first-team All-American, you get your jersey retired, your name on the stadium. And he's the only one on this team that is in consideration for a major football award. And so he is my unsung hero of the season.
Yeah, I was maybe going to be one of those eyebrow raisers, but your points, I mean, top special teams performer. And like you said, I mean, I can't remember a bad snap from him, as consistent as can be.
Yeah. A great guy out of the transfer portal that they got.
Yeah. 1 year, solid. That's kind of, I mean, a lot of coaches would love an addition like that in any position. Certainly at long snapper made a big difference to that special teams unit. Our second award, rookie of the season, freshman, first year sophomore, who came in, really impressed. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to say 2, Cam Lenhard and Prince Welleman Mielen, just because both those guys came in, played right away, looked like they fit in there along the line of scrimmage. Lenhard, I thought he did some good things there in run defense. Princewell, really good pass rusher. Both those guys, maybe not out there for 30, 40 snaps a game yet. Again, they're freshmen. They're getting, 20 snaps a game. That is huge, huge for their development. Going up against these really good Big Ten offensive lines too. Thought they held their own, had some really good individual games out there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Since you took the defense, I will take the offense.
Since I took both of them.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Thanks for that. I'll take the offense, and I will go with Jalen Lloyd. I think that, he played in 10 games, but didn't really get a lot of work until late in the season. And he still finished 3rd on the team with 237 yards on 6 catches. Granted, 2 of those were for 50 plus. But he was one of 2 players in the entire conference that had multiple 50 plus yard touchdowns. And I liked what I saw from him in the little bit that he was out there. And I can't wait to see his game continue to grow.
It's incredible watching him make those big plays. It's like, if not for Matt Rule, he might not have played college football. Could have ran track. That was probably going to be the plan. Just run track. But Rule comes in, offers him, sees that speed translating there to that wide receiver position. And here he is, big playmaker, and going to be a major part of this offense next season.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, really incredible from him. And speaking of the offense, even in a tough year, we'll still hand out an award for Offensive Player of the Season. I'm going Heinrich Harburg. What about you?
Begrudgingly, I also go Heinrich Harburg.
He scored the most touchdowns.
Yeah, he was responsible for the majority of their offense. He did have some good moments. He had some bad moments too, but that's just, he was responsible for the most of their offense. If we wanted to go in an unsung-ish guy, I'd say Ben Scott.
Yes, certainly. And I think it's tough too because you look at like those running backs. I mean, several of them contributed, but like none of them were the workhorse the whole year. Obviously, not necessarily the dominant wide receiver. The passing game was pretty limited. 3 different quarterbacks played. Like it was every skill position was shook up. Heinrich, the most consistent of all of them. So that's who we're going with there. Tough year for the offense, but not so for the defense. I think there were a number of players we could have picked here for the defensive player of the season. I'm going to go with the leading tackler, Isaac Gifford. Just seemed like every week he was making plays, stepping up there from the secondary. Great play recognition. He was able to drop a little bit deeper, play some more games there in that safety role as opposed to maybe the rover there playing closer to the line of scrimmage. I mean, do-it-all player for the defense. Every week he was out there tackling. Very consistent season from him.
Yeah. And he is one that I considered as well, but I went with Reimer. I know he only played 10 games, but he was still a force out there. He had, let's see, I don't want to get it wrong. He had 25 tackles, or 48 tackles, excuse me, with 7.5 tackles for loss with 5 sacks and 5 quarterback hurries. So, and, third team All Big Ten.
Yeah, you see Reimer out there. He's always in the thick of things. He's making those defensive calls at the line of scrimmage too. Such a key player for this defense. And yeah, certainly I think his All Big Ten selection was kind of a recognition of how well regarded he is by the coaches around the league as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No question.
And our final category, we had Offensive Player of the Year, we had Defensive Player of the Season, we got Team MVP, the most impactful Husker this year. We're in agreement on this one as well. Ty Robinson.
Yep.
What a year from him.
I mean, he's coming back.
Yeah.
He could play even better next year. I mean, just an incredible season from him on both defense and special teams. I just don't think there's anybody else we could give this to.
Yeah. And it's one of those things too where like if you only looked at the stats and you looked at Ty Robinson's season, you'd be like, that was all right. But if you watched a game, you watched a couple offensive series and he's in the backfield. He's got his hand up in the quarterback's face. He's getting past 2 rushers. He's shooting right up the middle. Like he is phenomenal. The impact that he made every game, pretty much every quarter that he was in. I mean, it was as long as you watched a Nebraska game this season, you saw Ty Robinson make some impact.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I wish there was like a stat or just like a line on the box score that just said how many times you're like in the pocket.
Yeah.
Because it felt like anytime they were, looking to throw, he's back there.
Absolutely.
Every time.
Yeah. And certainly it seemed like no matter where he lined up to or, whatever different blocks the offensive line tried to throw at him. I mean, he had a great swim move. Him and Huntmaker both there on the interior. They were wreaking some havoc, and certainly Ty Robinson coming back. You got to think he's going to be a potential All Big Ten defensive lineman next year.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. And then, with him on the field goal block team, I mean, if they treated field goal blocks like volleyball blocks, he'd have 2. And then you go back and you look, and he's so close on so many other ones too. Like, I don't know. He's a force to be reckoned with up there.
Yeah, just an impactful player, certainly. And his announcement a week or so ago that he was coming back certainly kind of alleviated one of the major questions for this Nebraska offseason. A couple items to talk about on Nebraska's offseason to-do list. And I think first one on the top of that, hold on to Tony White.
If possible.
Yeah, might be tough, huh?
Yeah, he has interviewed for the San Diego State opening. I think that would be a really good fit for him. I know that Matt Rule won't stand in the way of him leaving for a job if it's the right fit, if there's a support system there, if you don't feel like you're on an island, then if he wants it, right? And based on that he's, interviewing for these, he wants it. And I think he'd be really good at it. I know that's not what Nebraska fans want. I know Nebraska fans want to keep him around, but, go after your dreams.
But the flip side of the coin is, hey, wait for that super good Power 5 opportunity come up, is maybe the thinking that could get him to stay.
But, on the other side of that, what if it never comes?
Yeah,
Like,
true.
These jobs don't necessarily grow on trees. These opportunities don't come every day. You could miss your window. Maybe Nebraska's defense is terrible next year and he doesn't get the looks. And then, there are, if you look at any level of football, NFL, Power 5, Division 1, there aren't the opportunities for coaches of color like there are for your white coaches. It's just not. And so I hate to tell a coach of color to turn down a head coaching opportunity if they want it, if they think it's the right fit, because it may never come again.
Yeah, certainly. And that's something Matt Rule mentioned a couple weeks ago. As much as we enjoy debating Coach White's decisions for him, he will, of course, be exploring those options. I think definitely wait and see mode for Nebraska on that one. But certainly they want to hold on to him as a defensive coordinator. But player personnel is going to be a major talking point these next couple of weeks. Transfer portal opening, decisions to make, and players healing from injuries too. Several season-ending surgeries that players went through these last couple months. Guys like Ramir Johnson, Gabe Irvin that we mentioned, Deshaun Singleton, Turner Corcoran healing along the offensive line. Obviously, those guys were starters. Nebraska's going to want to count on them in big roles next year too, but got to heal up, got to be able to come back and be healthy for spring practice is the first step on that list.
And some of them won't be ready by then, just due to the nature of their injuries. So the goal for those guys would be get ready for camp.
Yep, certainly. So conditioning, lots of months of conditioning await for those injured players, but also decisions, some of them for injured guys, lots for uninjured guys. But wide receiver Marcus Washington's an interesting one. Technically out of eligibility, could maybe seek an extra year, medical redshirt based on this last year, but did appear in more than 4 games. So don't know how lenient the NCAA wants to be on that one. That'd be an interesting one to watch. But lots of different other guys who have potential 6th year, 5th year, all confusing right now with the COVID stuff. That includes Garcia Castaneda, Isaac Gifford, Brian Buschini, John Bullock, Nick Henrik, Ethan Piper, Bryce Benhart. Not even an exhaustive list. There's more Huskers out there. So those guys, they'll take their time. They're meeting with their coaches. Not a huge rush on that, but Nebraska will want to have those numbers figured out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. And, whatever those guys choose to do, hopefully they choose, for the right reasons. They really think about it, and I know that they will. The last thing I want is people going after them on social media if they choose to leave, because that's dumb. Don't do that.
And the other thing, too, is, it takes a toll on your body. 4 or 5 years of college football. Some of these guys have gotten injured in multiple seasons, too. So that will be part of the equation for those players making those additional year of eligibility decisions. And as I mentioned, transfer portal, this is a crazy time in college football now. So for Nebraska, it's twofold. Hold on to the guys they have, because a lot of promising young players. This era of college football, there's no guarantees that you're going to get them for 4 years. They can transfer away. And of course, they got to hit the transfer portal. The needs that I've got listed: quarterback, maybe offensive line, depending on how those eligibility returners decide, wide receiver, or defensive back. Those are the 4 that I would maybe identify. But you could probably say any spot on offense could realistically use a little reinforcement.
Quarterback, circle it, underline it, highlight it, circle it again, exclamation point. Yes.
And there's certainly been no shortage of quarterbacks hitting the transfer portal these last couple of days.
Yeah. But, you got to look like, yes, they might be a hot name, but do they fit the mold? And some of them haven't. So.
And the other thing to consider here, too, is obviously when you're talking about a transfer portal quarterback, the NIL equation is a major, major factor. So, it's like balance the scheme, NIL, the player, the fit. I mean, there's a
the
lot of
culture
different.
fit, too. That's really important for these guys as well.
Yeah. So next couple of weeks can probably expect some movement in that area. Players coming, players going, decisions, and of course, recruiting happening at the same time. Coaches will be out on the road. This Nebraska 2024 class, I think, mostly finalized. Can maybe expect a couple more additions there before that late December, early signing day. But they'll also be recruiting for the future 2025 guys, major focus when those coaches get out. But one thing's for certain, I mean, in December in college football, this is a crazy time for everybody.
Yeah, the one positive of not making a bowl game is they don't have to balance that on top of everything else.
Yeah, you get more time to look ahead to next year, whereas other staffs are scrambling to balance those two things. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So
if there is one downside to it, is they can focus all of their attention on the future.
Yep. So certainly expect some roster changes. This will take place next couple of weeks, of course. Any breaking news, anything that follows, make sure to stay tuned at journalstar.com. And as I mentioned, anybody looking for a little bit of volleyball action will be joined by Brent Wagner later this week. Special volleyball NCAA tournament preview, Life in the Red edition. Looking forward to it.
Should be fun.
Yep. So that'll do it for today's episode. As always, appreciate all of you listeners and viewers. We'll see you later this week.